cannot tell you how many times I've heard somebody say something to the effect of, I want to lift some heavy weights because I want to get stronger and gain muscle. Well, that's all well and good. But if you want to get stronger and gain muscle, my friend, you're going to need to pick, because those are two different things and they require two different ways of getting there. Can't hit a nail and a screw and a bolt into a board with the same tool. Webinar time. Let's do this. Resilience Weekly coming at you. We're talking about training this week. More specifically, we're talking about the resistance training results continuum. Now, the reason that I feel like we needed to discuss this is because I cannot tell you how many times I've heard somebody say something to the effect of, I want to lift some heavy weights because I want to get stronger and gain muscle. Well, that's all well and good. But if you want to get stronger and gain muscle, my friend, you're going to need to pick, because those are two different things and they require two different ways of getting there. Can't hit a nail and a screw and a bolt into a board with the same tool. Fat loss, getting stronger, gaining muscle, these are different things, requiring different tools. So let's understand why and what to do. All right, here we are. Like I said, different goals, actually different things. We need different methods in order to approach each one, or some combination. Understand that you're making choices. You can't optimize for all three. So this is why having a plan that's relevant to you and not just some plan you found on the internet is a requirement. It's a fucking requirement. So here's the caveat though. If you're not doing absolutely nothing, if you're doing jack dick right now, then getting to the gym and working out will give you all three, because anything is better than nothing. And so if you just start picking heavy stuff up, you're going to get stronger. You're going to activate your metabolism because you're going to elevate your heart rate. And you're going to give your muscles some stimulus that we should probably think about getting a little bigger. But after the first 3 to 6 months of like newbie gains and adaptations, you really do need to start picking. So if you've been at this game for longer than that, and likely most of you have, you've been training for a while, probably doing the same bullshit exercises that you were doing a year ago, you need to be a little bit smarter. So let's understand, first of all, what's going on at a physiological level. And then we'll back into what that means as far as training protocols, and then the method to why we set up the resilience method the way we do, and some homework. So you should screenshot this. I should actually put a watermark on this before I tell you to screenshot it, because if this is all you know, you already know more than most people in the gym and most trainers, to be honest. So the continuum sits on a scale of reps between 24 and 50-ish. And you can see that the primary adaptation changes as you go up or down that scale. Below 24 reps, you're really talking, and this is total reps per workout, by the way. So if you do less than, say you're doing power cleans, right? And you're doing like 5 sets of 3. Well, that total volume is 15 reps. And that lands you squarely inside the range where you would be adapting for power. And that makes sense because you're doing power cleans. That is a power exercise. That's the whole point. Now, if you do 5 sets of 8 power cleans, like people in CrossFit like to do, you're no longer training for power. You're training for fat loss or hypertrophy. You're kind of right on that cusp. What did I say? 5 sets? That's 40 reps. So yeah, you're on the threshold of fat loss and hypertrophy. And a power clean is not conducive to fat loss and hypertrophy training. It is a high skill, high difficulty exercise. And if you're trying to do 80% of your max with minimal rest for 40 reps, you will get hurt. And that is why people get hurt in CrossFit. Boom. So below 24 reps, we have power. Above 50 reps, we're really just talking about muscular endurance at that point, which is not bad, but it's not going to make you bigger and it's not going to make you stronger. It's just going to make your muscles able to take a licking and keep on sticking, which can be beneficial for sport-specific adaptations where you really need to do a certain movement or exercise a certain muscle for a long time. But in the context of like what most general pop people are looking for when they go to the gym to look better, feel better, move better, muscular endurance is not of a primary concern. So we're really focusing on the middle of this band here, this 24 to 50 rep pocket. And what you'll notice is that we have strength, fat loss, and hypertrophy strung across this band in a continuum. So between 24 and 32 reps, you're optimizing for strength. And then as you start to creep towards that higher end, past 30 reps up to 40, now we're talking about fat loss. And then from, 36 on up to 50 reps, that's the real window in which you are optimizing for hypertrophy, which is muscle gain, right? Now, there's a bit of it's not just about reps, which is why we specify about load and rest. These are crucial components that we want to keep in mind when we're training. Obviously, strength is going to be the highest load percent of your 1 rep max out of all of these. Hypertrophy is number 2, fat loss is number 3. Because with fat loss, the rest ratio is the smallest. And so fatigue starts to set in, central nervous system activation starts to get fatigued as well. And your ability to perform clean reps goes down. So if your ability to perform clean reps goes down, but you're still training at a high intensity, high load, well, again, you're inviting injury. That is CrossFit. So for fat loss, we're generally targeting like 70 to 80% of our 1 rep max. And then as far as rest, strength, you rest the most. Hypertrophy, you rest less. And then fat loss is where you typically will rest the least. But there's still a huge variation in terms of what constitutes a rest period for fat loss. Notice 30 to 90 seconds, that's a 3x difference. So depending on what movements you're doing, how the interval is designed, etc., that dictates what zone you're actually training for. That dictates the rest for fat loss webinar right now, because that was gold. And if you retain that, you're so far ahead of the game. But let's continue. So here we go. Here's the continuum in a visual format. I like visual formats. We got strength, fat loss, and hypertrophy in the middle, power towards the low end, and endurance. So let's talk a little bit about why this is happening, how this is happening. So for strength, the main driver here is your nervous system. Believe it or not, it's not your muscles. It's not just your muscles. I'm not going to get into the weeds too much, because at a certain point, cross-sectional area of muscle does allow for an increased, what's the word I'm looking for, expression of strength. But in essence, it's what makes you strong is your nervous system telling your muscles what to do. And so that's why you want to train it a little bit different. That's why volume wants to stay low, because like I said, your nervous system is a precious commodity. And if your nervous system gets too fatigued, nothing goes well after that. Form breaks down, your ability to recover goes way down, right? So you don't want to do that. So this is why we keep the volume very low, protecting the nervous system. So examples. So you've probably seen, let's see, 8 sets of 3, 10 sets of 3, 7 sets of 4. I really like 6 sets of 4 or 5 sets of 5, actually. Those tend to be my go-to set rep protocols for strength training. And when we're in a strength block, that's exactly what we do. Next up, hypertrophy. So the main driver of hypertrophy, aka muscle gain, is time under tension, which is why the volume is the highest and the load is as high as we can basically get without gassing ourselves out, our nervous system out. The more time you spend your muscles straining against load, the more they will grow. It's a mechanical stimulus. It's not a nervous system. It's not a signaling stimulus, right? So there we go. And for fat loss, it's about work capacity, how much work you do in a given amount of time. Yeah, if it's steady state, then you're basically trying to create adaptations in terms of just stroke volume, oxygen uptake, fuel usage, things like that. So that way you can do more at a given heart rate zone. But that's different. That's anaerobic. If we're talking as resistance training, we're talking more. Should have said aerobic. With resistance training, we're talking more anaerobic. And so what we're doing when we're eliciting for fat loss and the metabolic effect over time is we're actually training beyond our body's ability to, which we talked about when we talked about cardio, our body's ability to sustain that effort. And so the more work you can pack into a compressed amount of time, the more of a fat loss effect you're going to have afterwards, because your body has to recover from that increased amount of work, right? So this is a little bit of a look under the kimono of the Resilience Method program. So if you guys who are in the program, you know that we have a 2-day resistance training split with a third conditioning day. And each resistance training day is a full body workout. It's a full body workout. It's either a push, squat, press, or a hinge pull. And the reason is because I actually do want to have my cake and eat it too as much as possible. I want to know the rules so I can bend the rules so I can get fat loss and hypertrophy and strength as much as I can inside of a given workout, inside of a given microcycle week split, and inside of a given, like macro cycle, and which we'll talk about in a second. So when we do it this way, and we have squat press and a hinge pull, we're utilizing the way the body is put together. We're working with how your body's put together, so that way you get maximum volume for hypertrophy, maximum density for fat loss, and you're getting maximum synergistic muscle activation, so you can lift the most load. The trifecta, baby. So what I said before about how you can't do all three, well, I hacked the system. Just kidding. If I was training if I was really I was like hell bent on having one, then the program would look a lot differently. But most of you aren't hell bent on having just one. If you are, let me know. We have a program for that. This is kind of like a one size fits everybody. We want all of these as much as we can and with as minimal amount of effort as we can. And this is how we do it. So we talked about the resistance training. We talked about the frequency. So we get to train every muscle group at least twice a week, sometimes more. And then we also get conditioning. We get aerobic work as well. So now when we zoom out and we're talking about macro cycles, a macro cycle plays itself out over the course of a year. And what we do is we break it into quarterly blocks, which I think, did I shoot a webinar on that? Maybe, maybe not. Quarterly blocks, kind of in keeping with the seasons. So we're finishing the spring block at the end of June, which is a power phase. You guys remember what we talked about power a few minutes ago. And we're moving into an endurance, conditioning, and fat loss phase for the summer. Let's see, this is a sequence, not a shuffle, different quality. Yep, covered all that. This is what I was just saying. So we've been training sub 24 rep volume, total volume for our main lifts, not 100% load, less, because we want speed, exactly maximum movement speed. And this comes before the conditioning block, because when your nervous system is primed and you're able to generate maximum power, maximum force and acceleration, all of a sudden you can get more out of your conditioning. The muscles are ready to go, your nervous system is ready to go. You can just like get right into the groove and go farther faster. So 3 months building the foundation. Now, starting in July, we're going to actually take that foundation and we're going to build on it. A lot of people are doing triathlons and different sort of races, marathons. The summer, Spartan races, high rocks, that sort of stuff's coming up. People just like to be outside. It's nicer. Going for runs and swims and all that. So perfect time to focus on conditioning in general, as a general focus for our training. And plus, everybody wants to look good for the beach, taking their shirts off. So that this type of training is the most efficient way of achieving that. So what I want to leave you guys with is some questions for you to think about. The first question is, looking at our main 3 areas of focus: fat loss and conditioning, strength and power, hypertrophy and muscle growth. Rate each one of these on a scale of 1 to 10 based on how important it is to you right now. Because we just spent this whole time talking about how they're different. And so if you haven't thought about it before, it's really helpful for you to actually work through, well, what do I want most? What's most important? Whatever that hierarchy looks like, we can make sure that we're actually achieving that in how we set up your training routine. And then the second question is, now that you've ranked each one, create an actual measurable goal that you can work towards for each one. So for strength, maybe you want to hit a specific weight on a specific exercise, or you want to be able to do a certain amount of pull-ups, your first pull-up. Maybe you want to be able to do a muscle up. Handstand would be more in the skills category than raw strength. I support handstands, as you know. So if that is a strong goal of yours, also let me know that. And for fat loss, same thing. So if it's a certain body composition target that you're after, or a certain like a more qualitative metric, like I want to be able to see my abs, or I want to be able to like see my ab vein, or like I want to have a flat stomach, or I want my arms not to jiggle when I when I wave. I want to get down to a size 34 instead of a size 38, whatever it is, right? And set an actual tangible goal. And then same thing for hypertrophy. The most empirical one for this is to measure the circumference of shoulders, biceps, chest, midsection, hips, and then set targets, right? But you can also just, again, go more qualitatively and take photos. What I find helps with the easiest thing to do with clients is like, just rate yourself, scale of 1 to 100. How sexy do you feel? How good is your body? It's hard to argue with that. And then set a goal. Where would you like to be? If you're a 65 right now, and you'd like to get to an 80, all right, now we have a game to win, game to play. But until we do that, we're just throwing shit at a wall, right? So, yeah, hit me up in the chat or in the comments, answers to these questions, and we'll make sure that you guys are on point, dialed in. If you're not training with intention, then you're not really training. You're just coming to the gym. So training has a goal in mind. You're training for something. You can't just train. That's the last slide. I'll leave it on that note. Again, hit me up with any questions. I love you guys. I'll see you next week.